You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by Aborn Co. I'm your host, Tim Dooner. Thank you for joining us today. We've got company. Jill Clifford, president of Aborn Co. She took the long walk down the hallway to my new studio. Jill, what do you think of the digs?
I love the digs. I'm super excited for you that you were able to create this space. It's awesome.
I finally get a window, and I immediately cover it with a gigantic black tarp.
I know, it's a little depressing, but the green helps spruce things up a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, and I think the lighting helps, too. It's very mood-oriented.
Yeah.
Like, if you put these lights on and you get used to it, it's impossible to do the overheads again.
Overhead lights are the worst.
They
I
really
like them
are.
in a kitchen, and that's it.
They're not flattering to anything.
Nope, I agree. No, it's looking good.
It is looking good. And you know what, Jill? So, last week, we had Adam Erickson from Holth on, and we were talking about what you and I talked about on our first episode, emerging technologies in logistics.
Mm-hmm.
And we were covering some of the truth and rumors. So the people here in the staff could kind of understand what we were talking about. I brought in my Jedi training set, which is an augmented reality headset. And I swear to God, I didn't just bring this into work so my wife wouldn't yell at me for buying such a frivolous purchase. But I was able to demo what augmented reality looks like to the staff. But you were strangely absent from this. Did you know I was going to make a video?
Yeah, see, that would make me really stressed out.
Yeah. Oh, knowing that you're doing that with a mask on, holding the lightsaber.
I think I would get claustrophobic, to be honest.
Wow. Well, it's this thing called Jedi Challenges. They have it at Target. What it is a augmented reality helmet. And augmented reality, you probably heard of VR and AR. Mm-hmm. The difference is that with like a VR helmet, it's an all-enclosed world. Where with an augmented reality, you can still see the world around you, but it projects like holograms in front of your view. And it anchors onto sensor points. So the relation for the toy version is the lightsaber connects to a sensor and you're fighting stormtroopers and you're lightsaber battling people within the game. The application in supply chain would be you're looking at a pallet and you're seeing, an entire schematic on that, or you're working on repairing something. There's a ton of applications for it.
Wild.
And it meant I had an excuse to buy a lightsaber set, Jill.
And I got to tell you, so after watching the video, I would absolutely go with Donna Patton in the heat of battle. She was so calm, cool, collected. She was awesome.
I thought that was kind of like a prison shank style she was doing, just a million pokes to death.
She just knew what she had it. Just like I related to her work environment where Donna and her team are really responsible for managing our client shipments. And she's the one that gets the last minute, crazy load that has to be covered you think, oh my gosh, this is impossible. There is no way we're going to be able to cover this load. And as calm and cool and collected as she is, she always gets it done. So it was super fun to watch. Megan was just all over it.
She's scary. She don't get in a fight with her. She
would have hurt someone.
Yeah.
And Caleb had just beautiful technique.
Yeah. We'll play a clip of that for you right now. You can check it out. It's on our site and everything.
So funny.
Time for an augmented reality demo.
Die.
The intimidating. The frenzy. The conservative approach. Here comes the dark side. But he who is one with the Force brings the light. Hey! Isn't this how Darth Vaders are born? Now imagine this in the context of your supply chain.
So funny.
So you mentioned Donna. You and Donna both, you have been moving freight for about 30 years now, right?
Correct.
And you've been moving freight in the LTL market.
Right.
So as far as this Jedi thing, is something kind of sad or maybe a sign of the times happened recently here in New England. New England Motor Freight, NEMF, a staple of New England. If it matches, anytime you go on 93, 95, anywhere around here, you would see, probably as often as you'd see XBO, and XBO only got really huge in the past few years, but you would see NEMF trucks all over the place. We're not anymore. I think they have like a week left.
It's true. It's a bummer too. They were, a solid family-owned company, really had a good service, operated for many, many, many years. And
over 100.
Really, really good. And, I think they were, the 19th largest LTL carrier in the U.S. with above $400 million in annual revenue. So it was a surprise. It took everybody by big surprise.
Earlier reports were that Amazon was one of their customers. I don't know how true that is because nobody's verified it within NEMF, but a similar thing is going on with XPO. We just mentioned them.
True.
They have just lost their biggest customer, 5% of their business. I think everyone knows it's Amazon. They just haven't officially said that it's Amazon, but it's Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting though, because now we're seeing these carriers. They get to this size, they're a certain size, they're a certain big, and they join up with bigger partners. But it can leave you in a world of hurt if you're a carrier and that
So
partner
true.
leaves you. It can leave you in an even bigger world of hurt if you're a shipper and you're with that carrier and they're gone. So Jill, there's two things I want to talk to you about today. And why I have you in here is talk about this New England Motor Freight bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
If you get LTL freight with New England Motor Freight, or if this happens to another carrier, what do you do in the event? So you'll give us some background on the bankruptcy, what happened there, and then we're going to go over something that I build into our decks all the time, but it's all data and info you guys give me. So I want to understand this more, and I think our shippers need to understand it more, and that's route guide discipline, which ties right back to this LTL freight, because if you had NEMF in your route guide, part of route guide discipline is making changes, right, when a carrier leaves or a carrier's service goes away.
Agreed.
So this is a great episode. If you have LTL freight, any freight, you want to know what's going to happen in the event of a bankruptcy, and then some best practices for how to move your freight in general with the route guide discipline.
Sure. Yeah, and the one thing with the New England Motor Freight is they announced it, and then they also announced at the same time that they were not going to pick up any more freight. So you were really left holding the bag, right?
Yeah.
And we have clients who New England Motor Freight was their primary carrier in the Northeast. So how do you react to that?
What was their reaction? Did any of our clients have any sound bites or quotes? Have you heard any feedback on the market from that?
Honestly, I think they're a little scared because it did come as such a surprise. So who's next is really where they're coming from. One is immediately, what do I do? And then two, what does this mean for us as an industry? And who's next? Who's in trouble? How do we know? I didn't hear an industry expert out there forecast this New England Motor Freight. It really came by surprise to much of the industry.
Yeah, I first heard about it when Chris was running with his hair on fire down the hallway.
Absolutely.
Yelling about it and telling me to send out a newsletter to alert everybody.
Yeah, and Donna was probably very calm.
She was.
Yeah.
She always was. Even with lightsaber in hand and a horde of stormtroopers trying to take her out. But just in case someone's not familiar, they're not from New England, they're not familiar with New England Motor Freight. This is applicable to no matter where you are. But,
sure.
So out here in our market, huge news came out a few weeks ago. New England Motor Freight files for Chapter 11 and has immediately started shutting down operations, as you mentioned, by shutting down operations, not picking up new freight, and getting into that hairy situation where you're dealing with creditors now. And if I'm a shipper and my freight's with them, I need to know what to do.
Right.
But, so here's the scope and the size of this company, though. New England Motor Freight carried about 8% of the LTL freight in New England, and roughly 1% of the national LTL freight. And this is kind of a bad thing. Last year, all we talked about, capacity crisis, right? Beginning of this year, we finally see the rates going down a little bit, capacity growing, and then this happens, Jill.
Right.
What does this mean for most closest to us? What does this mean for our market here?
Yeah, again, when you start talking about this route guide discipline, it's where it's important to really be thinking about that. Because if you are a shipper and you're strategically working through carrier relationships, which means you're in some route guide discipline, you've made commitments to carriers, they're handling your freight, a carrier shutting down becomes a crisis. We can't pick up your freight today. What do we do now? Well, if you have this good route guide discipline, you immediately have a backup carrier partner that you can go to who's handling freight already for you. NEMF obviously was just the Northeast. So chances are you're doing business outside of the Northeast and you have another carrier partner that can take this freight on and take it right away. So that's where, again, kind of this route guide discipline comes in. If you're just rate shopping every day or spot quoting shipments every day and you continue to use New England Motor Freight and then they close their doors, or if any carrier does, you could be in trouble because you don't have relationships built with other carriers. And it matters in these times, probably more than ever. So what we did is NEMF closes doors, they're not picking up. We immediately contacted all of the clients doing business with New England Motor Freight, and we already had a game plan for them. Because again, they're working strategically with carriers. So they already had other carriers in place that could manage this freight. Now, long term, it may not be the best carrier, meaning, you may have a client who's using New England Motor Freight regionally and their long haul carriers handling the rest of the country. Now, some of those long haul carriers aren't going to service the best service that a Northeast carrier would. But for the immediate, they can pick up your freight today. So we went through that process client by client to determine, okay, who do we have as a backup that can handle this freight? And then what you want to do is, and I think that kind of put the Band-Aid on it, people were able to ship. And then we worked with New England Motor Freight to find out exactly what was in the system. Again, this is also where TMS comes into play, right? Because for our clients who are in a transportation management system, we could visibly see how many shipments were in the system moving with New England Motor Freight. And we knew exactly what terminals to go to at New England Motor Freight to make sure those shipments were going to get delivered and get delivered timely.
When you're in a TMS environment, and this is just out of my own curiosity, so when this happens, you find out, and I think it was like 5:20 in the hour, everyone's leaving when we heard about it. When you go into the TMS, is that just plug and play? Will the system automatically tender new carriers for you? How does that work?
Yeah, so we had to stop our auto tender process for any clients that were using New England Motor Freight and kind of override the system just for that one afternoon.
Yeah.
To reroute the pickups that we had auto tendered the morning of the announcement, we had to then override and change them. And we made sure at 5:20, if they had been picked up, they had been picked up. If they hadn't, we diverted that to another carrier. And then we have to manage the technology, right? So then it was Donna and her team going in and unplugging New England Motor Freight from the route guides, plugging in the new carrier, and setting up the auto tender for that new carrier.
So almost like an employee leaving a company, you take the password away, you take the laptop away, and you
That's right.
give that to somebody else.
Right, exactly. Yep.
So what about the ones that are not in that digital TMS environment? What about just, again, anecdotally here, what did we have to do to the clients that you couldn't just go into a system and just stop auto tenders?
So we notified, and within a client, there may be 10 distribution center shipping. So we notified everyone at the client that needed to know. We updated their route guide. So if they're not in TMS, they do have still a strategic route guide. We updated all the route guides, replacing New England Motor Freight everywhere we needed to, and gave them instructions on who they should be shipping. We also notified the carriers that we plugged in as the backup, right? To say, hey, look we've got you plugged in here in the Northeast for the time being. So let's get grounded. Let's make sure our freight's getting picked up. Then we need to have a longer term conversation, which is actually, I think, what we're seeing right now in the market. So we obviously, because our clients are shipping so much freight and we're helping them negotiate freight, we talk to carriers all the time. So the first calls we made were to A. Dewey Pyle and New Penn, two of the largest Northeast carriers, right? The thing about A. Dewey Pyle, they had already been heavily investing in drivers' equipment, and they just either opened or expanded 8 new service centers. They were already positioned for growth. They're ready. And New Penn honestly had the same story to tell, that we have room, capacity is here. But I think initially when New England Motor Freight closed, that freight didn't necessarily go right away to those 2 carriers, because if you didn't have pricing with them, again, you may have been giving that freight in the Northeast to YRC because you had pricing with them, or ABF or XPO. So now I think you'll start seeing these Northeast carriers starting to get more bids and starting to really see some more freight come in to their systems.
Did we have any trouble finding capacity, or was there enough in the market to fill in for the gap or the void that NEMF had left?
Well, we didn't have trouble finding the carriers, but again, it's because of the existing relationship. If you talk to a carrier, the first thing that A. Dewey Pyle and New Penn says is, we're going to take care of our existing customers first. That freight matters first, and then we're going to help people that were with the New England Motor Freight program that need us to help them move their freight. So again, if you're strategically working in a route guide and pricing with carriers, you may have UPS Freight who NEMF goes under. You call UPS Freight and say, I need your help. You're an existing customer with them. They're going to help you.
I guess my last question just on this sort of local side is, if your freight was already picked up but not delivered by NEMF when this announcement was made, What does that mean for you?
Yeah, they're scared. I mean, shippers were scared. Like, are they really going to deliver this freight? How does this really work? And that's where we really help our clients. We still, at a corporate level, have access to the folks at New England Motor Freight, and they have a strategy in place with our clients to get all of that freight delivered, which it has. You know, they're a Northeast carrier. Much of their service is next day. So then the last piece of it is going to be the financial piece of it, right? Have they invoiced everything? Have you paid them everything? And then the claims. If you had any claims out with New England Motor Freight, you know, we made sure with our executive team at New England Motor Freight that they were going to follow those claims through and clients would be made whole if, in fact, New England Motor Freight was at error on the claim.
Yeah. So nationally, 1% of freight nationally. It was 8% here. We were still able to find capacity. But is this going to have any effect throughout the year on spot rates in the LTL market? Is there any concern, or are they just going to be, there's going to be a whisper in the wind and an old memory?
Yeah, what a shame to think about it that way, isn't it? No, I mean, I think capacity is always a problem. And again, if you're not really looking at your supply chain as it relates to outsourced transportation providers, those are the shippers that are getting stuck in times of trouble. One thing we don't talk about a lot is because we have so many clients shipping so much freight, there's a lot of carriers out there that some shippers have never even heard of. Within the Northeast, there are some rock solid New England carriers that maybe a shipper never even thought of because they've had New England Motor Freight all these years. You know, so I think, again, it's so important that you understand the carrier market so when something like this happens, you can react in the right way.
You know, there was a survey I just read, and I believe it was Serasis, but if it wasn't, I don't mean to misquote you, but it said something like, in this survey of the carriers they looked at, air, ocean, and ground, only 40% had a digitization plan in motion. Was NEMF in that 40%, or are they in that 60% who still aren't doing anything?
No, they were definitely in the 40. I mean, we had API connections with them for track and trace. We had EDI connections with them for invoicing. And we also had a digital environment for all the spot quoting we did with them as well. And they were making connections outside of their own technology in other companies' TMS systems in order to work in that digital environment with them.
All right, Jill, so we covered the shippers and their freight, but what does this mean for that side of the industry, for the carriers, the brokers, and the 3PLs? Personally, one thing I've suspected is that consolidation is going to run rampant soon. There's too many brokers, there's too many carriers, and there's too much interest, especially in these equity firms and bigger companies just swallowing things up to get even bigger market share. And it's a follow the leader type of environment. So, like, for example, DSV is trying to acquire Panalpina. So Maersk bought Vandegrift and CMA CGM bought Siva. And is this a sign of the times, Jill? Or is this just, these are just good opportunities for companies to grow?
I do think it's a sign of the times. I mean, you just rattled off a bunch of companies that are acquiring other companies.
Big ones, yeah.
And I don't see that stopping. And same with the technology space. You know, there's all this money being really pushed into our market and the technology. Then what? What's going to happen with all of these technology providers? We may see some of the same, where one's going to acquire the other. So again, I really think this speaks to understanding carriers and market conditions. It's so super important. And it's really hard to do. If you're a shipper, you're responsible for the outsourced transportation spend. You're also responsible for a whole lot of other things internally within your organization. So it's really hard to keep up with the market conditions. I mean, we have teams of people here doing it for us and for our clients. So imagine being in a company and you're maybe a team of one and you have 3 people working for you and you're responsible for a $5 to $10 million freight spend. To find that time to research and understand market conditions, it's hard. It's hard to find that time, but it's crucial, especially in times when you lose a carrier.
Jill, if I'm a 3PL, I'm a little nervous right now because the industry's changing a bit and you're seeing carriers aggressively go out and buy Vandegrift, for example. So ocean carriers used to, they worried about the boxes, you know? They didn't really get involved in the brokerage side, and that allowed 3PLs to play nice with them. But now they're buying those 3PLs.
Right.
And now they're positioning themselves in the market against them. Even bigger than that, you have companies like Amazon and Walmart totally taking control of their supply chains.
Right.
Sign of the times?
It is, yeah. And I think in the broker 3PL environment, you're starting to see it feels a little like they're nervous. And again, that's just a feeling. I can't state that someone told me that, but as you're starting to see these 3PLs and brokers who were really living in a transactional environment. They were trying to find a truck, buy it for one price and sell it for another. You're starting to see those companies trying to adopt a different mindset of how can I manage and find solutions for shippers versus, oh, I have a truck today and I can cover that for you. And I think that is because of the sign of the times.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon now lists carriers as their competitors.
Right.
It's on.
Right.
It
really is. It really is. It's a big mindset shift, and especially in our industry. You have folks like me that have been in operations, whether it's at carriers or clients for 30, 40 years. This whole, forget the digital environment, but then all these acquisitions and then trying to manage what works and what doesn't, it's hard, Yeah,
I mean, I worked in 3PLs for years. Most of my career was with 3PLs, other than a few shippers before coming here. Most 3PLs, in my experience, they have a relationship with a carrier or some freight agents, which usually aren't the carrier. They're actually a conglomerate of someone bigger.
Right.
They're like a brokerage in China that just has way more customers and can leverage freight.
Right.
And a lot of the 3PLs in the U.S. are just kind of like freight resellers. They're like sales and marketing departments, pricing departments.
Right.
For these agent firms.
Even within themselves. You see those really large 3PL broker models out there, and they don't even communicate internally with each other. So let's say I work for a large 3PL and I'm in Des Moines, Iowa, and I've got great resources for flatbed carriers, which are super hard to find. They see another franchise or agent office under their company umbrella. They don't share that information with them. They see them as a competitor.
Well, yeah, because what we used to do in these meetings, and you would talk about pricing for the year and it's blah, blah, and you never got a good deal unless you're gigantic. But what happened is they would always promise you that, oh, no, we're not going to go after the brokerage or the final mile or the dray. We really just want the container on the boat.
Right.
I don't know. How do I bring an RFP now to a company like Maersk, perhaps, and not be at least a little concerned that they might just cut me out and shift their business to Damco or to Vandergrift?
And at that point, I mean, the ocean market is a great example of if you're just, as a broker, looking at ocean, what value are you bringing? These ocean lines are essentially sharing all the same vessels.
They are, yeah.
So there's got to be some kind of value add there. And again, I feel like, again, it's a feeling as I'm reading and talking to people and being out in our market that these 3PLs that are living transactionally are really trying to rebrand themselves as a managed solution, that we're going to provide solutions for you, not just transactions. And it's a big mindset. And I think for large 3PLs, it's not just this rebranding externally. You've got to get that buy-in internally as well.
Yeah.
You do.
Absolutely. Again, sign of the times, NEMF, sad news, it's going away, but you know what? Get used to it. It's gonna keep on keeping on.
It's true.
But you as a shipper, something catastrophic or bad for a week or two in terms of your freight, like NEMF, it's a good reason to look at your route guides. Mm-hmm. But route guide discipline, I think you're going to tell us, is a best practice. So, Jill, I've had to write these in decks. I'm sure a lot of people listening don't really know what route guide discipline is. That might even be just vernacular from people within our side and not their side. So, what is route guide discipline? What do you mean by it, and how does it work?
Russ Aborn, when he founded the company 31 years ago, this whole route guide discipline was such an important part of how he was going to build the business. And so it was great for us that work here to be able to adopt his vision because it's crucial. And here's why. The strategic approach to working with carriers. The route guide discipline, one, it's always service first. So finding the carriers that can service your needs. Two is then negotiating the right price to do it. And then three is you then as a shipper say, okay, I'm going to make a commitment to you, carrier. I've committed that you're going to be my primary carrier in the Southeast. Well, now you want to make sure that happens, right? So that's where this route guide discipline is. So you develop the route guide internally with your organization as a shipper. You want to implement this program and you want to make sure that carrier is handling all of the shipments, let's say in the Southeast, if that's what you've committed for them. And here's what happens when you do. As long as the carrier meets your service commitment, you now have really good service at the right price. No one really talks about it, but imagine being a customer and you're in this environment where you spot quote everything, and I'm your customer and you send me a shipment every week. I really don't like the relationship of 1 week it's carrier A, the next week it's carrier B. I don't ever know who's coming to my dock. And you're paying the freight. It's your decision as a shipper. But imagine with route guide discipline that John, who's the Southeastern freight driver for his pedal run every day or every week, he's bringing that shipment to your customer. That's building rapport. That's peace of mind. That's a good customer experience. And so
although, Jill, I don't mean to interrupt you, but listeners and Jill, if you saw the infographic we put out last week, there's actually a good chance with 98% turnover rate in the trucking industry, which by turnover rate in trucking, I want to clarify this for people too. All that means is that if there's 98% turnover rate, that a company with 100 employees within a year's time would have to hire 98 new employees.
It's mind-blowing.
That doesn't mean that every single person left at once, people retire, people
Sure.
go away, but it rivals fast food and it rivals seasonal work.
Yep.
So it's a little great. You could have anybody showing up at any dock.
And to your point, so think about that. All right, so you've created a great customer experience using the same carrier, committing to them, right? You've created less congestion at your dock because now you have carriers handling certain regions of the country for you, and it's the same carriers every time. Now think about that driver. How's his experience? He's going to be delivering to the same if we were all living in this environment, his workload, it doesn't change much, right? He's delivering to the same companies every day. He's got some forecast of what his day is going to look like, what his week's going to look like, because you've made commitment to his carrier organization that he's going to be your primary carrier, right? So even the driver experience, would that help the turnover rate? It might.
Yeah, well, then he's like a milkman, like when they used to bring... And we're going to date ourselves here.
Yeah.
And I'm not even 40 yet, but in Needham, when I grew up, we had a place called Crescent Ridge, and it would bring you milk. You had like a metal bucket on your front door, like a metal enclosure. I don't think...
We still have it. Yes, Crescent Ridge and Hostra's down the street. Yep.
Wow, because it's funny, when you see those milk bottles as an adult, they're really nice, but they're really small, too. Yeah. It's like 12 ounces. It's like we've been so big gulpicized as a society.
Well, and I think, again, this technology and AI and blockchain and being in a digital environment is an absolute best practice. But you cannot lose sight of relationships and working with people as a partnership. You still have drivers delivering freight. You still have people in the warehouse preparing freight and shipping freight, and relationships do matter. Even with all this technology, we still we have a new client come in and we start standing up the negotiation strategy. We still hear 10 years ago, the shipper got in a fight with the carrier driver and he never wants to see that carrier on his dock again. And the flip side of that is, we're going to go out to negotiate. Well, I can't lose John, my driver, for Southeastern. He's amazing, and here's why. So relationships matter. They just do.
Let's get a little broader for a second. So managed freight solutions, that kind of covers it all, at least what we do. And in a very broad sense, all a managed freight solution is someone managing your freight and coming up with the best solutions, hopefully an expert in the field.
Right.
And not just some person who is appointed because they were standing around in a warehouse at the time.
Right.
How does the routing guide start?
It starts from a negotiation. So you're starting with a carrier negotiation. Bids come back. You start analyzing those bids and determining, okay, what makes sense from a service perspective and from a cost perspective. And that's the discussion of then where the route guide is developed. Who are we going to use and where are we going to use them?
And when we say route guide discipline, like in my head, if I didn't know any better, I would think that there's like literally like a spiral bound book on some transportation person's desk in a warehouse, and they have to look everything up in it. How does it work? How does, when you have route guide discipline, what is the tangible asset that you're looking at, or is the TMS handling that and just means stay in the TMS? What is it?
It's funny. We still have those books. We call them our routing books. Because imagine it's not just all your outbound freight, it's your inbound freight too. So you have to notify your suppliers that if we're paying the freight and we're responsible for the freight charges on our inbound shipments, this is the carrier we want you to use. So There's a couple of different layers to it. If you're in a full managed TMS, it's simply uploading that route guide into the technology, and the technology is then driving the decisions.
So that's all your discipline is. Make sure you upload a properly represented one.
Yes. And for inbound, same thing, because your orders are still in that TMS for inbound. So then the TMS is actually pushing to your shippers for inbound materials when they have a shipment, who to use, and it's the right one. Now, if you're not in TMS and you're not in a digital environment, you do still have somewhat of a manual routing instruction, whether you've built it in a database or you've built it in Excel, and that needs to be communicated to anybody that's going to be moving freight, whether it's your outside warehouses, your manufacturers, co-packers, inbound raw materials. That does need to be communicated to them. Here's a new route guide, new effective date, new carrier. Then how do you measure that, right?
Jill, my eyes, this isn't a video podcast, but like my eyes are just getting huge right now because I'm thinking about some of the data spreadsheets I've had to turn into visualizations. And there are like thousands of items on here.
Right.
There are tons and tons of carriers. So you're telling me that in a non-digital environment, in an old school, old-fashioned environment, there's some human being or human beings there picking up some dusty book with a ruler and a highlighter looking at zip codes and whatnot to figure out the routing?
They may be opening a document on their computer, but
okay.
Yeah. I mean, you'll still go into shipping warehouses and you'll see a printed route guide stuck on a corkboard, and that's how they're I have a shipment from, Mass to California. I'm supposed to use ABF for that. And now I have a shipment from Mass to Connecticut, and I'm supposed to use a Dewey Pile for that. Yeah. I mean, they're still doing it. The other thing, though, is without TMS, on an order level, a lot of ERP systems still allow you to place a carrier name. So I'm a shipper, an order dumps into the warehouse. There can be a carrier allocation in electronic environment without TMS. You can load that information at the order level, customer level, carrier allocation.
See, Jill, I feel like the only acceptable way to do that physical version is if you have those like old-fashioned printers with the perforated edges on the side, because then you're just really fitting the look and staying era-specific.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing to think about is route guide discipline. There's so many reasons why there's value to it. But let's say it's hard to get. Let's say you're a company who has 10 different distribution centers, and folks at those centers are making their own decisions about carrier utilization, even though as a company, we're going to adopt these routings. So then what you want to do is, how do you measure that? Right? It's really important then to understand when the route guide discipline isn't happening and what it means for you. So one of the things that we do is, if you're in TMS with us, we're doing that load planning function for you, so that route to guide discipline is very high. Unless there's an expedite shipment and we can't use the routed carrier, or the mode shift changes. So it's an LTL that becomes a volume because it falls outside of cube capacity rules. But let's say you're not in that environment. Then what you want to make sure of is, at some point, a carrier is going to send you a freight invoice. And it's really important not just to capture the invoice details to pay the carrier, but to capture the shipment details to see what's going on. So one of the things that we do is, we have a handful of clients today who are not in our TMS yet, but the freight invoice still comes here for audit, whether it's EDI or manual. Most of them now are in an electronic environment. So you're capturing all the shipment details. So what we're doing every month is we're showing that client, look at, here is the routed carriers. Here's when you didn't use them. And when you didn't use the routed carriers for these shipments, we rate them with the routed carrier pricing, and we're calling it a lost savings. I mean, here's what you've lost as a result, because inevitably you'll have a CFO or a VP of global supply chain who says, we have to get our freight costs down. Great. It's not just about beating up carriers. It's about this route guide discipline. Where you're giving away 6 figures a year in freight costs because you're not using the routed carrier everywhere you should be, right? So the data matters.
And this may sound like a stupid question or an obvious one, but how do you decide how shipments are routed? How do they even end up in this route guide?
Really having the freight expertise and understanding carriers. So because we negotiate and work with all of our clients' carriers, we have a good feel in the market. So we know what clients and what carriers are a good match based on their industry, based on the service requirement, and based on the mode. Now, we don't make the decision for the client, though. They decide who they want to use. We've had clients in the past say, I want to use this carrier in these lanes. And we say, okay, but we think you may have some trouble there, because the transit in these lanes for this carriers is 3 days. It is a carriers that can do it all day long in 2 days. Does that matter to you? And they may say, nope, we love this carrier. We want to use this carrier. The decision is still the client's, but what we bring really is that knowledge in the market.
How much are shippers costing themselves by not having great route guide discipline? Like when you get this data that you're talking about and you look at the way their freight is currently routed, is it usually in a state that needs to be fixed or doesn't make sense? And there's tons of areas of cost avoidance and better ways to be doing it?
What's interesting is the really robust clients who have a strategy and have a go out to market, and you look at their freight profile and you see, wow, they've got a good handle on this. The first thing you do is you kind of look at it by regions and see how many carriers within a region are being utilized. Even when they're there and they're doing a really good job and you can see the route guide discipline, usually what we can bring are additional options. Again, like this whole regional market, a lot of big companies don't even see that. They just don't have the access or the time to find these type of assets that could really help them, whether it be in less than truckload or truckload. And then a lot of what we see is, what you're speaking to, kind of the bad environment, which is a company is just going out to the market for spot quotes and using low cost carriers every day. Now, they see this as a mindset of, I'm paying the lowest cost every day. I've got to be in great shape. And inevitably, we usually find cost reductions for them. And we always find service improvements because it's one of those things that you're not building that relationship with carrier partners. So one day they get a shipment, the next day they don't. They don't see you as a valuable customer because they can't really forecast when you're going to use the carrier or when you're not, right? So you think you're paying low cost, but you're paying low cost from the wrong benchmark. It's
sort of like buying a bottle of water every day for $1.50 instead of buying a 12-pack for $5 and think you're saving money because each day you're spending less money.
Yeah.
Even though at the end of the week you spend more.
It's so true. And I think, gone are the days where you can just blame the carrier for everything. A lot of the work we do is educating our clients. We've had clients who've brought us in and said, our carriers are awful. You need to replace our carriers. You need to find us better carriers. And when we dig in and we do kind of an ops review and we kind of have this process where we interview the departments, everybody touches freight, right? What we find oftentimes is their problems are theirs. It isn't actually poor carrier service. It's the service they're providing to the carriers that's poor. Whether it's I've left these drivers at the dock waiting for hours on end to get freight picked up. Whether it's I pay the carriers in 90 days. Some of their practices are really broken, which is causing bad service. But it's not because of the carriers. It's really on them. And so those discussions are hard to have, but you have to have them. Where you say, we can help you. There's good news and bad news here. Good news is, bad news is you have a lot of problems. And the good news for us, and you may not see it this way, is the problems are actually yours. And so if you're willing to be open and work through a strategy and create partnerships and create better processes, your carriers will service this freight all day long.
We talk about terms, and some of the feedback I hear in the market are terms like data and optimization are very vague and too encompassing. And they're right in a lot of ways. People in the market are confused. And you hear it a lot of times about people who are dismissive, like, optimization. Well, who can do that? Or they think it's like this one-button mythical thing. Mm-hmm. And I can kind of see why, but maybe not for the reason they're thinking. And it's because optimization takes a lot of granular level. And it takes someone to really know your freight to get in there. Yeah. So doing almost any of the practices we talk about is a part of optimizing your freight. It's not all tech or data or some fancy solution or enterprise software that you need. A lot of this stuff is best practices. And one of the simplest ones it sounds like you can do is to have good route guide discipline. So how does that factor into, I guess, optimization though, and how you look at things? Are route guides a key component in training our shippers on how to use them and how to adhere to them?
Yes. And when you speak to optimization, you may have set route guides in place for truckload, for LTL, but you always want to strategically be looking at how your lanes move when they move, because we see optimization as prior to routing, prior to tendering, are there any opportunities in whether it's the given week or the day for two shipments that would tend to go LTL and follow the standard route guide? However, this week they're heavier, so it makes more sense to pull these through as a truckload stop-off. We have clients who are shipping standard LTL, but in the third week and fourth week of the month, a pool distribution program works for them where we're actually sending a full load of freight from origin to the Pacific Northwest to an LTL carrier where they're then delivering all the LTL shipments. So optimization's been wonderful in technology.
Let me stop you for 1 second.
Sure.
Because you may have whooshed a few people, and I think you may have whooshed me really quick there too. So you're saying a couple of terms. You're saying truck what was it? Truck stop.
Multi-stop truckload.
Multi-stop truckload and pool truckloads. Just explain the terminology just
Sure.
really quick.
So multi-stop truckload would be we pick up at Joe Clifford's warehouse and there's 2 shipments on there that both of those shipments combined fill the trailer. And I'm going to stop and deliver Tim's shipment. And then when Tim's is done delivered, I'm going to go on to the final delivery. That's a multi-stop truckload. And that could be, you call them stops in between. So you could have 1 stop and then a final delivery. You could have 2 stops and then a final delivery. And in some cases, 3 stops. When you get to 3 though, then pool distribution may make some sense. So what that is, so again, we're at Joe Clifford's warehouse and she has 15 LTL shipments that are all going out to the Pacific Northwest. She puts them on 1 truckload carrier. That driver drives it from her DC out to Oak Harbor Freight Lines, which is an LTL carrier, and their terminal in Tacoma, Washington. And then they make the 15 less than truckload deliveries. Another term might be they make the final mile delivery, right?
I think that I think where it trips up people sometimes is because the multi-stop, it sounds like carpooling, or it sounds like Uber Pool, where you get the Uber Pool, you're going to ride with 2 other or 3 other strangers, and they're just going to drop them off in whatever order.
Round the world and home again, that's the sailor's way.
Right.
Or you'd say like an airport shuttle. But actually, they're quite a bit different. They're vastly different.
They are. And, the thing that as operators and freight experts, we struggle with the technology coming in and these guys that are just doing optimization technology saying, we can lower your freight costs. You just dump all this data in here and we run an optimizer. And most of the time, if you don't know what you're doing from an operations perspective, that optimizer, if you set it up, it's usually not going to work. And what the operators know is that technology is terrific, but it absolutely has to be customizable. I mean, if you're in big box retail, chances of you pulling off a multi-stop truckload with 3 stops on it and hitting appointments, delivery requirements to your big box retailer customers are pretty slim. So when you buy technology and you say to your person managing load planning and doing all your shipping, hey, hit this button and optimize and do what it tells you to do, they're not going to be able to. And then what they do is they give up on the technology. So if you're looking at optimization technology, it's out there, but I can't say this strong enough. You got to make sure you customize that so that you're not missing service for customers. And, again, it's like anything else. If you keep hitting the optimizer button and it doesn't work, you're going to stop doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, improving and optimizing transportation systems is kind of like a dance. It's music. You need the sheet music and you need someone to play it. And they need to play in concert, and it'll be beautiful if it isn't, but it's cacophonous and awful otherwise. Right. And you're seeing people with very high demands. Amazon, Walmart, some of the first. But exactly what you're talking about. Because the carriers aren't getting to the level that they need them to be at with this information sharing, able to do these multi-stop loads digitally and not have human beings having to even interact over every single freight move. Yeah. Which would be insane if you're the size of Amazon. That's a lot of SKUs. That's a lot of shipments.
Yep.
It's a ton of pallets.
That's why you're seeing, I think, over the last 5-6 years, this whole specialty consolidators. So there's companies out there who have warehouses and assets for drivers and trailers that are just managing Walmart.
Yeah.
So you can give them all your Walmart freight, and they're going to do all this kind of optimization and coordinating with your freight amongst their other customers' freight.
Let's leave our listeners with something. If they're listening right now and kind of having a mild panic attack because they don't have any route guide discipline or they don't have a route guide, how do they start, Jill?
What they should do, and we can help them. We have our day one optimization, and that really is you share your data with us and we can run it through a freight profile. And with that, we can tell you kind of where your current state of the market is and where you could be in a best practice. And that's where kind of this route guide discipline comes to fruition.
There's at least one person sipping a cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee in traffic right now saying, what does data have to do with route guide discipline?
Data tells a story. So, with the data, you can determine where you are today and, where you should be as a best practice. It's amazing. We hear all the time about, well, this is how we're managing our outsourced carriers, and this is how we're tendering freight. And then you get the data, and it's a completely different story. So, we all have good intentions, but things get layered, and then things get missed, and processes aren't followed. And so that's what the data really allows us to do, is say, wow, man, you have unbelievable route guide discipline. Good for you. Or, you know what? You've got some problems that I think we can help you with.
All right, so there you have it. Reach out to Jill. She'll help you.
I'll do it.
On this particular one, this is her expertise in the ops team. I let them handle the route guide optimization for us.
That's right. Yeah, definitely do it if you need some help.
Jill, if I bring the AR headset back in, are you going to strap it on your head?
Absolutely not. I am so claustrophobic. I can't. I'd probably cry or fall or.
Even though you can see the surroundings around you,
no,
there's still, it's so weird. It's sort of like, some people, if their breathing gets short, they like panic, like
That's what happens. Down. So one time my niece, I think, had one of those virtual reality. She got it for Christmas. And they actually videoed me when they put it on, and I never, ever want to see that again. Yeah. I was so scared.
Yeah. And then, like, what would be even worse is people watching you doing it would just think, like, Darth Vader was force choking you.
Exactly.
And really you're actually hyperventilating.
Right. And I'm going to die. That's how I feel.
You've fallen and you can't get up, Jill.
Hey, look, I like freight. I don't like virtual reality games.
This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey from Let's Talk Supply Chain, and you are listening to Consulting Logistics.
Now hiring. Excellent positions are available right now to work with an industry leader crafting cutting-edge, modern managed freight solutions. Look, guys, nobody can move the world alone. It takes creativity, curiosity, and collaboration between great people. Join Aborn Company's Boston area team and be a part of their vision to rethink how shippers and carriers look at their global supply chain. They offer 30 years of traditional industry experience in a free-thinking, tech-friendly, startup environment that doesn't just encourage their clients' growth, but also the growth of their most important asset, their team. Choose to be extraordinary. Choose to be the architect of your career. Just visit abornco.com, click on the Careers tab, and choose your own adventure today. We can't wait to work with you.
Looking to modernize, digitize, and future-proof your supply chain? Visit day1.io for a free Day 1 Data Optimization Report. That's day, 0, 1.io. Isn't it time you got optimized? Announcing, on October 10th, 2019, Aborn Co. presents TransTech 2020, a supply chain vision and innovation conference. This event is the first of its kind in Boston. Join our panel of speakers from the worlds of logistics and technology as we discuss the modern needs of the supply chain and the merger between the physical and digital footprint that freight creates. Head on over to transtech2020.com for more details. We'll be talking about AI, automation, autonomous vehicles, blockchain, data purity and capture, future-proofing the supply chain, market conditions, transportation management systems, and so much more. Head on over to transtech2020.com for registrant and sponsored details. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to email me at tdooner@abornco.com. That's TDOONER@abornco.com. I'd be happy to learn something new with you. For this episode and all of our previous shows, visit consultinglogistics.io or simply search for Consulting Logistics on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player of choice. And hey, if you like the show, the best way you can give back is to share it. And if you really liked it, go on iTunes over there and rate and review. Be much appreciated.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. We are out of time. Jill, would you like to do the honors today?
I would love to. For Tim Dooner, I'm Jill Clifford, and happy shipping.
Jeez, Jill, I'm going to have to step in there. For Jill Clifford, this is Tim Dooner saying take care and happy... Come on, Jill.
Shipping.
Shipping. Thanks, Jill.
You're so much better at that.
A lot of practice.